Sano Bhunatu Saviryam Karavavahi Tejasvinavaditam Astuma Vidvishavahi. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. May He protect us both, may He nourish us both, may He give vigor to us and vigor to our studies. May we not cavil with each other. Peace, peace, peace beyond the all. So generally it's customary to see if there are any questions.
I have a question, Swamiji. Is it necessary to dispense with thinking completely in order for the ego to dissipate?
Well, my funny answer to start with is most people have dispensed with their thinking, it seems.
Most people have what?
Have dispensed with their thinking. Yeah. So there's no reason to dispense with a faculty or an area of the mind that has a useful purpose. The whole idea of keeping the mind quiet, ultimately, I think that's what you're probably referring to. Yeah?
Sort of, yeah, well, thinking, I suppose, I mean, in the sense that it separates you from the rest of creation, that sort of thinking, you know. Now, it can be good and it can be bad and it can be in between. You know what I mean? Like, I would refer to good thinking as wanting to help society do the best you can, but it still encourages the ego, and the ego can be crushed in that end of things just as much as it can in perpetrating evil, if you know what I mean.
So conscious thoughts, like everything else, comes into three categories. So these are the gunas. So they can either be virtuous, sattvic, harmonizing, illuminating, where whose characteristic is there's no sense of self-interest whatsoever. And then there's rajasic thought, of course, and tamasic thought, both of which are characterized by the presence of an egocentric position.
The rajasic and the tamasic.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, yes. Ultimately, of course, all the three have to be transcended. So, but we have to use a technique whereby we use the sattvic type to neutralize and make ineffective the rajas and tamas in the conscious area. Conscious area means the unconscious we have no direct access to. The only direct access we have is through the conscious mind, developing consciously a new set of patterns, behaviors, habits, healthy ones. Healthy ones characterized by this non-egocentric position. A generosity of service in spirit, a spirit of love, unconditionally everywhere, just for the welfare of all beings. It's described like this, the welfare of all beings. Those people, earlier you have seen that those people of steady wisdom would have been there for the welfare of all beings. Not just all humans, but all beings. And that's a significant difference, I suppose, because very often there's an accusation against Oriental religions to say, you just want to sit quietly, and you don't worry about the welfare of anything, and you're fatalists, and you simply say a person is in a particular condition because of their karma, and that's their business. But that's only because people don't study these things. Spontaneously, you'll want to act for the welfare of all beings. Once you are in a certain state of steadiness, in theistic language, saturated with God, one with God, saturated with God, close to God, thinking of God constantly. So in the passages we're about to read, one of the highest sacrifices, for example, is not ritualistic sacrifice, it's the repetition of holy words, God's name, japa, constantly. And so this whole idea of constantly comes up from time after time. Supposing you're constantly thinking of your arthritic knee, then that'll be a great disturbance to you. But supposing you're thinking constantly of the Lord of the universe. Now we have this opportunity in this chapter, Vibhuti Yoga, to do that, since we cannot see that entity that is an absolute, that is, doesn't have any moving parts. It doesn't have a position as we know it in space, nor does it have any evolutionary change in time, and therefore, how to conceive of such an entity? So we can conceive of the effects, the radiation glories that we see. And if we have an eye to see it, we see it everywhere. And with the great advantage of modern science, we can see further than what is described here in some ways. And you think that until you come to the 11th chapter after this, and there you see that everything we know in modern science is actually listed there. So that it doesn't matter how far the imagination stretches, still you'll find the Lord of the universe standing there in advance of you. It goes ahead, the self goes ahead of all thought. When you arrive on the other side, self is still there, divine self. So thought is a useful mechanism that we have, a useful tool. In fact, it's the only real tool that we have. And this is a technique which we can call sublimation. Taking something and seeing the sublime aspect of it. What religion calls God. And we can see it in progressive stages. And this Vibhuti Yoga is designed to do that. We look at the outside thing first, maybe taking it for granted, examining it closer. And then what we find just as we find the warm rays of the sun are connected to the sun, emanate from the sun, still see, in the same way these glories emanate from that divine that we call Ishvara, God. So that is the use, the practical use really, of going through these various glories. That is why we've compiled them in a particular way here, from the 7th chapter onwards, in a condensed form to see some kind of glories. And every religion, more or less, seems to have this idea of repetition of divine glories. In the Catholic Church, we have all of these recited. Blessed are this, and blessed is that, and blessed is that, and so on. So it goes on. In various ways it goes on. So recounting all of these as samples, till we catch the idea. And then spontaneously, wherever we look, whatever we hear, whatever we experience physically, and physically means within the range of our sense organs, and also ideas. Now, many of these examples are mythological examples to be examined. The beautiful thing about myths is that they are wonderful stories in their own right. We can enjoy them in their own right as wonderful, beautiful stories. And then we can go to a different level and see, is there some kind of inner meaning that has a practical application for me as well? So as we go through this, we'll see if we can find something like that. And so one of these divine aspects, these aspects that we find in a mythological context, is elucidated here. And this is Brahaspati. Brahaspati, see, everything requires a priest. What does that mean? It means that if you want to conduct your life in a proper way, there should be a selfless, competent priest who is able to guide you through the rituals of it and guide you through the meanings of it and help you get what you want from it. That's the real aspect of a priest in all religions. That should be it. And so in heaven's realm, the same thing happens. So these great beings, these devas, they also have such a priest, Brahaspati. And so naturally, if it's the highest guiding the whole universe toward the highest harmony, aspect of harmony, and requires action, we can say ritual is action, and requires some activity, some kind of dynamic aspect being there, and harmonized and regulated, guided if you like, then that would be exactly the same as the divine. And so for that reason, it's put like this. Purudhasam cha mukyam mam vidi partha brahaspatim senaninam aham skandaha sarasham asmi sagaraha. Of the priests, we all know, priests, ritualistic priests everywhere, I know me to be the chief Brahaspati. Then he goes on. It's well known that those leading the divine armies, the dynamic aspect of the divine is called Skanda, and so therefore I am the general. Of all the generals I am that. And of the bodies of water, I am the ocean. Whenever we look out on the ocean, it gives us a sense of infinity and gives us a sense of joy. I know when I was young, when we went to the sea, coming from a landlocked country, visiting the sea was a great delight, and we'd always look out for the horizon there. There's the sea, there's the sea. And we'd all shout mercilessly from our parents' ears' point of view, oh, there's the sea, and so on. And the beauty about the sea is it's not what it seems. Especially Ramakrishna also gives that example that, and poses a question. The sea, is it blue or is it colorless? Well, from a distance, it's blue, or green or whatever. But when you pick the water up in your hand, it's colorless. Does God have form or is he formless? Is it an aspect of absolute, or has it got some quality? We can view both. Both are correct. It depends on the relative perception and the counter question, where are you standing from? If you stand far away, it looks like a certain thing. And if you stand extremely far away, then you're not really in contact. What is ignorance? Ignorance is the distance that you are from the divine. And so all of these things are there to bring you into closer contact, bring you nearer. And when you come absolutely close, absolutely near, then you'll find interesting enough that nearness becomes oneness. And so the ocean is a profound metaphor for infinite. Earlier on we were conducting meditation, and in the light of the Durga Puja, which is the festival now, you must have noticed today the weather changed. Well, we now very much seem to be launched into autumn. But autumn in different places is a very different thing. And I'm not specifying the particular country, because one of the most beautiful places that I've experienced autumn in is Canada, United States of America, Canada, where all the leaves are such vibrantly different colors, beautiful reds and browns. And then, of course, who can deny the delight of stomping through dry leaves, you know? So all of these are characteristics of autumn, where in some countries there's a brand new freshness, a relief from unbearable heat. And at that point, everything seems to have a new promise. Now, of course, where we are now, there is a kind of a change now, because summer has wound down and there is a change, and we are preparing for winter. But even there we can see the glory of Mother Nature, and it seems that universally we call nature feminine, Mother Nature. So what we find there is something like waves. When we have a meditation, for example, on Durga and all the manifestations, let's say 10 manifestations are there for different parts or different descriptions of the cosmos, then we can reduce everything really to waves. And the meditation began by thinking of the mind itself and its processes and the thought that is in there as waves. If it helps, think of them in different colors, with different amplitudes and frequencies and wavelengths. And then go on to the body as waves with a greater kind of wavelength, a greater amplitude, something a little bit more solid. Waves nonetheless. Supposing we view the whole of the universe as a series of waves, and then use the capacity of our imagination. This is a very, very beautiful faculty we have. The capacity to bring something into a creative imagery that lifts our heart. Supposing we view these waves as the Divine Mother of the universe, her hair tresses. Supposing we can see the fabric of space and time as the woven cloth on her body. Supposing we see that the huge voids in space are her skin. Supposing we see that the various twinkling bodies that we see in the universe are her aspects of her jewelry. Supposing we are able to incorporate all of this in the most profound and vibrant imagery we can think of, then we get a closer idea through even this creative metaphor. We get an idea of waves. And so when we say, I am the ocean is not just one body of water that remains completely still. It has waves in it. It has waves, it has vortices. And what we call this individuality of ours is nothing more than a vortex caught up a little bit. When you're traveling on an aircraft and you look down at the sea, you can trace a wave come up. And then you see how long will it last. And it lingers for a while and then disappears and another one's taking its place. And is the universe not all that, just waves and vortexes, but one single energy? One glorious single energy. If we can catch that, then we'll understand a little bit about this ocean as in its wave aspect. Then what about its aspect of depth? We find there it's all still, no waves. We find it's deep and homogeneous. We find it's the same everywhere. And look at this metaphor that is often used, to merge in the wave, to become one with the ocean, become one with this substance called water. Dive in is the expression. Now in water we can gingerly put a few toes in, and in Irish water with the temperature as it is, that might be suitable for some people. Or you can put adventurously a foot in, and it may turn a glorious color of blue. And then we might just immerse the entire body. And when we immerse the entire body in the ocean, regardless of the temperature now, taking that out of the imagery, then we find an element of freedom. And it's very easy. And we have a fascination with water. There is a theory, by the way, called the aquatic ape, that says that our evolution developed by the seashores of Africa, where we learned to communicate, we learned to swim, we lost the body hair, and we became adapted, our lungs became adapted to the water, so that even a baby born in water can breathe in a natural way, or withhold the breath in a natural way. We seem to be natural swimmers. So that theory is there as a significant component of our evolution. Regardless of that, the ocean for everybody has, this sagara has this great, great meaning for the whole of humanity. So the beautiful expression, the ocean suggests the infinitude of the Lord. And merging the mind in its expanse is a form, actually, of the worship of the Almighty. Then we come on. Maharshinam Bhrigur Aham Giram Asmiyakam Aksharam Yajnanam Chapaya Yajñosmi Stavaranam Himalaya. Of the great rishis, we all understand that in Vedanta, the authority that we always refer to is the Vedas. Something that is seen directly and known, something that is revealed, not because it's invented, but because it's there always. It's perpetual. And the discovery of that, and the discoveries of that, are called rishis, those seers. And so many of them would be there. Many of them we don't know of also. But of the great rishis that we know of, I am Bhrigu, that is one of the most revered. And in utterances, I am the monosyllable Om. A number of times it's said. So what is this Om? Now during the meditation, as a preliminary, we repeated this mantra Om, this kind of protecting thought. And so by now you'll know that Om is the primordial movement. So if we are still thinking about this imagery of the universe as waves, the whole of existence as waves, sound waves, heat waves, radiation waves, we can also put it as emotional waves, thought waves, waves of different descriptions. If we view the whole of this in that wave form and think of it as a play of waves, then the primordial oscillation, as it were, vibration, movement, is this Om. This is what comes out in human sound. The yogis will hear it very, very differently. And of course, the whole of the Mandukya Upanishad is dedicated to expanding and describing the meaning of this sound syllable Om. In short, it represents the totality of existence and has been used from time immemorial for Hindus, Jains, Sikhs in their version of it, Hindus, Buddhists, all of them revere this ancient sacred sound symbol. Therefore, by repeating it with meaning, says Patanjali Yoga Sutras, meditating on its meaning, we can get the original feeling and the original realization ultimately of this first primordial movement which is there, from which all these other waves come. So it's a monosyllable, Om, I am that. Of yajnas, that is of all ritualistic sacrifices, I am japa yajna. Even when we do a puja, the last moment, we offer japa. We offer our own japa and to the Lord. If I was a salesperson selling you the merits of japa, I would have no problem. You see, it doesn't require any particular place. It doesn't require any particular time. It doesn't require any particular ingredients for ritualistic worship. You can say it anywhere, anytime. You can say it prior to sleeping. You can say it on waking. You can say it in the middle of any activity if it doesn't require your full level of concentration. And you can get into the habit where unconsciously it's being repeated. To lovingly repeat God's name, if you put it in the theistic context, what greater joy can there be? And so for this reason, I am this japa, yajna, because it is the easiest, and furthermore, it is mental, not physical. You see, it comes in gradations. Even a mantra you can repeat verbally, audially. That's a kind of gross form of it. And then you can repeat it with the lips moving, a more subtle form. And then you can just think about it, think of it, repeat it mentally, and understand its meaning, another dimension of it. And then that can deepen as an effect as well. So of yajnas, I am japa yajna. And we can do that anytime, any place. And of unmoving things, the Himalaya. There's nothing that we know of on this earth that is above sea level, that is higher than the Himalayas, the Himalayan mountains. Nothing higher than Everest. I say on the surface of the earth because when we go under the sea and measure from there, then there are things, if you reverse the mountain, then there's something like 10 kilometers you can go down. So certainly there's nothing more immovable and nothing more grand and nothing more impressive and nothing more solid and nothing higher than the Himalayas. So among the rishis born of the mind of Ishvara, we have to understand this. Bhrigu is ever in the highest superconscious plane. So the Lord's glory is revealed best through him. And then Om is the most sacred sound symbol of Ishvara, the Lord. Constant utterance of this monosyllable is a sure means to reach divinity. It is in fact equivalent to Ishvara. And then coming to Yajna, just reading the commentary here, is the act of the Jivatman making himself over to the Paramatman. We can view this, we view all the 24, 25, 26 categories that are there in Sankhya. We can view one of them as the Jiva and the other one as the Parabrahman and or Paramatman. And the relationship between the two is like drawing nectar from the one. And we can take one of various positions, 3 positions are available to us. But the easiest and most potent of all these yatnas is this japa yatna. Constant mental repetition of the Lord's name is japa yatna. See the word constant. Now I think before we referred to the 2 things, of course, practicing the presence of God, there's a kind of internal script. All of us are talking to ourselves. Even when there's no one there, every time there's a thought, there's a following of a kind of inner script. So we're all listening to ourselves. If we don't listen to others, at least we're listening to ourselves. So this constant repetition is there, and the more we consciously direct it so that it enters into a habit level, the better. So practicing the presence of God would have used something like that, and then another aspect of it would be this pilgrim's way, this Russian Orthodox person who wanted to find out the meaning of St. Paul's famous words, pray without ceasing, and wondered, how can I do it? And the whole book is a pilgrimage journey with him to see how is this possible, and finds this wonderful Orthodox phrase, Lord Jesus, Son of Mary, have mercy on me. And we can take that in a very superficial way, but which he initially did. And then he understood its meaning in depth, and then he realized, I cannot do without this. This is my constant friend. And this is also what I call making friends with your mantra. So there are people who may have gone on a long pilgrimage and asked me, what should I do? And I said, as you walk, repeat your mantra. Do your japa. As you go, do it. And at that point, at some stage or other, there will be a making friends with your mantra. A realization of its deep, joyous inner meaning will come to you. And so the Lord himself gets revealed in this. It can be performed any time and in the midst of any other activity. It involves no harm or hindrance to anybody. And the Lord is present wherever this japa yajna takes place. Now the commentary also mentions that the vegetable kingdom is classified as the unmoving beings. They are stationary, and their stationary lives consist of growing and thriving in the same place. And so hills and mountains are held as imbued with dormant life everywhere. So it's not just a mountain. When you look at it closely, there are things that live there. They are therefore classified with the vegetable kingdom. And among these mountains, the Himalaya is obviously the greatest striking wonder on its beholder. What a wonderful thing that we can use all these examples, and nowadays use film and pictures to get the same kind of feeling. We were talking the other day about 3D movies. And we can see how we can get the whole feeling of the three-dimensional aspect of what we experience. I don't know if there is here, or there was, or if you've ever come across it, but there were particular huge cinemas. There was one in South Africa, in Cape Town, where the National Geographic films and things like that were shown. And they were so vivid that they jumped out at you, without the use of 3D glasses or anything like that. I forget now what it was called, but a huge curved screen was there. And then to add to it, in some cases, the chairs are made mobile. So you get the feeling of, whatever scene is being there. It could be a fish coming past, Ashvataha sarva krishnam devashinam cha naradaha gandharvanam chitrarthaha siddhanam kapiyo munihi. Of all the trees, I am the Ashvataha, the Ashvata. That is a kind of fig tree, sacred. Its compatriot comparison in this part of the world with the oak tree, considered to be sacred. And so it's no accident that Buddha got his enlightenment under such a tree, this big banyan tree, which has the great characteristics of not being of any other use, it seems, except sitting there and inspiring us. And so for that reason, and of Deva, Rishis, I am Narada. That is, we have human Rishis, of course. There are various classes of Rishis, Raja Rishis and so on. And Deva Rishi, some entity called Narada. We get the Narada Bhakti Sutras, which are attributed to that. But Narada is often seen as somebody who comes in and makes a bit of trouble somewhere. And, but it's always useful in the end, that's the point. And so, therefore, of all, we may say devotees, you see, I am Narada. I am the one that ultimately, while disturbing people, becomes a kind of revealing factor on the way. So, of course, the other aspect of Narada, just like Japa, is Narada is constantly singing. He has an instrument in his hands and he's constantly singing this. So should we not also be constantly singing, either literally in some way or metaphorically, or certainly the heart? We have this expression that the heart sings. Something sings. And after all, again, looking at the metaphor of vibrations, we can see how the whole universe could easily be a set of strings, musical instruments. There's a scientist called, I think his name is Des Noble. He's a physiologist, a scientist, well honored and well qualified. And he's challenging many of the concepts of Neo-Darwinism, because his research is telling him that actually life is more like a music. So he writes a book, Music of Life, and asks the most fundamental metaphysical question we can ask: what is life? Now, here at Trinity College in the 1940s, 1938, 1940s, the great scientist Schrödinger gave a series of lectures, and that was compiled into a book, What is Life? And he there predicted the existence of the nucleus of the cell of DNA, even long before it was discovered and mapped out, as it were. So, what is life? Could it be something that is a process? Music, after all, is a process. Let's leave out the question, what is the thing that processes it? But how close those concepts are to understanding that the glory of the divine can be laid out in vibrational form, like music. The music of life, he writes a book like that. And so, of the Gandharvas, who are also musicians, I am the Chitrarata, and of the Sitas, of the perfect ones, those with great, great power, I am the Muni Kapila, because Kapila seemed to have conformed to all the aspects that we would expect in a sage. So the Ashwata is the people, or the hoary fig tree. It yields no edible fruit. Nothing in this tree is in any way useful to man. And still it has ever been associated with the worship of the divine. So any thought of this tree brings in its train ideas and ideals, all connected with God, because it has been described in this Bhagavad Gita itself, the 15th chapter, and also in the Kathopanishad, as representing the whole of the totality of life, the totality of existence itself. Still it has ever been associated with the worship of the divine, and any thought of this tree brings in its train, therefore, ideas and ideals. It is for this reason it is recognized as his vibhuti. Spiritually enlightened ones, as we said, are called rishis, not only from among men, but also from among the divine, the devas, and rishis have sprung up. So among the deva rishis, we mentioned the sage Narada, and he's the foremost because he constantly sings the glory of God. In addition to this, he is famous for setting up strifes and quarrels, of course, which end as blessings in disguise. We mentioned that. So the contact with Narada amounts to the same as contact with God. This is a far cry from putting God at a distance above the clouds somewhere. It puts God intimately in us and with us. And everywhere we turn, we can experience this. Of course, a muni is a silent one. He is constantly established in Japa Yajna, which we mentioned earlier. Sage Kapila is one endowed with all of those virtues, and therefore praised in this way. He is the author of the Samkhya system, as we know, philosophy. And further, he is held to be also sometimes as an incarnation of Vishnu himself. And so therefore it's natural for the Lord to claim him as his own. Uchai Shravasam Ashvanam Vidimam Amruto Pavam Iravatam Ganjendranam Naranam Cha Naradipam. Of horses, no mean to be the nectar born. These words you recognize from the divine glories, isn't it, that you sing? You see, there's this story of the churning of the Milky Ocean, which you're familiar with. And some of you have been to this in Cambodia. What is it called? You went there?
Oh,
Angkor Wat. And there you'll see a bas relief of this churning of the Milky Ocean. And so what's the meaning of it? Of course, we can take all these stories at face value and enjoy the story itself, but what's the meaning of it? Again, supposing we take this analogy of this ocean with waves, then to make something of it, something has to be churned. Something has to be disrupted. And therefore, you can take it in many different ways. That plus and minuses must be there, good and bad must be there, pairs of opposites must be there to do the churning. And of course, Vasuki is the snake that is wound around Mount Meru. And it's the only one of the rare cases where Shiva comes and rescues the world. Normally it's Vishnu's job, but he's there as a turtle to make sure that no hole goes in. And so the pole, as it were, has its frictional element. It is digging deep. And so Vishnu saves the world by incarnating as a great, great turtle. And so he's therefore occupied. But poison comes out from this as a byproduct of this churning of the Milky Ocean. And what to do? It threatens to destroy everything. And Shiva is called upon and selflessly drinks it. And so for this reason gets a blueness in the throat. Salvific value is therefore displayed in this churning of the Milky Ocean. But basically those that are churning it are selfish. They're doing it because they want this great thing that we all want, and that is nectar of immortality. And people have been searching for this for thousands of years. Is there some wonderful drink, some wonderful nectar, some remedy, there's some herbal thing that stops the aging process and stops death completely? And death is seen to be such a terrible thing. Is there some way we can live forever? And the whole of these philosophical discoveries and discussions are around this question of immortality. Is it possible to become immortal? Well, physically in the sense that we mean it, no. In another sense, it never ends, because there's a conservation of energy and matter. We find that it's just a transformation of things. Physical body is just matter and molecules and goes back and transforms itself into something else in some other form of energy. But fundamentally, I'm not born and I don't die. And this is the fundamental message coming out straight away in this Bhagavad Gita, in 2nd chapter. No bones about it. So repeating this is useful for us to remind us that in seeking immortality, we don't have to look very far, because our real nature is already immortal. And so in this churning taking place. Now we can take it as a mind also. We can take it on so many different levels. We can take it as cosmological churning, or we can take it as individual churning. That is in the mind in order to get something out, whatever we want, whatever desire we have, even if it's for immortality, then it requires a churning of the psyche. And that churning, therefore, is exactly what you are asking. This thought process itself is this churning. So from a psychological point of view, we require churning. What is tapasya if not churning? Creating an element of friction. But in this case, tapasya is going against the grain and is there. Of course, different types of tapasya are there, but in its highest form, this tapasya is purely of a purificatory nature. It is not to get anything, not to get a result. But one of the things that comes out is this nectar-born horse. And what a wonderful treasure a horse is. Don't forget, in those days when no cars are there, a horse is a very valuable thing. So this wonderful horse comes out. And of lordly elephants, have always been a symbol of the divine, a symbol of cosmology, a symbol of being carried, a symbol of the capacity to remove obstacles. So, and a symbol of great strength. So we have two symbols coming out, a symbol of swiftness and a symbol of strength. And we see this in a different context, because previously we had seen that it comes out in the context of Ganesha and Skanda. That is the intentional aspect and the dynamic aspect. So Airavata, and of men, the monarch, the king of kings. A monarch was born with royal excellence and is regarded as a spark of the divinity come in the human form. Some magnificence tells us that something as a source, something magnificent was there in the beginning. You can't get this something from a nothing, a potential nothing. It was there. The best of the horses, the best of the elephants, the best of the humans are indeed the manifestations of this divine glory of the Lord. Ayodhyanam aham vajram, denonam asmi kamaduk, prajasnascha asmi kandarpaha, salpalam asmi vashukihi. Of weapons, I am the thunderbolt. There's a wonderful story. There's a story of Dadita, a story of a great sage. Dadichi, great sage, who was under threat himself because he left the heavenly regions, and all the deities were in trouble because the old enemy, Indra's old enemy, had taken everything. We're going to put this again in a cosmological context and in a human context. Everything was taken. We find even in the Chandi, if you have the habit of reciting it during this period of time, you find it begins really the story of those who lost everything. So, losing everything, what do we do? They appealed to this great sage. And he sacrificed his own bones to make this Vajra, this great thunderbolt, as a weapon that finally overcame the great demon. So saved the world, and the implication of that really was, he released the waters, was holding the waters captive. Waters means the whole of the cosmological abundance and expansion. Holding it to ransom, holding life itself to ransom. This great sacrificial act was there. Self-sacrificing activity was there for the good of others, sacrificing himself. And so, I don't know if that Puranic story was there at the time when this and these events took place. Because, after all, the Mahabharata is a transition piece of literature. It comes between the Vedas and the Puranas. But still, even for that reason, we can say that it is there. This great weapon is there. And if you then look up into the sky and see, particularly in tropical climes, what is the most terrifying thing? Now in Africa it is. Lightning is a very terrifying thing. Thunderbolt or lightning is very terrifying because more people are killed by lightning strikes in Africa than car accidents. Well, there are not many cars actually in rural Africa, but still. So during a thunderstorm, lightning storm, don't stand under a tree. That's the most dangerous thing to do. And yet, of course, people take shelter there. So we can see, imagine now, not knowing the science at all, of this great, great lightning strike that comes, and seeing it hit the ground and create a fire. How terrifying it is if you didn't know what that was all about. And so from ancient days, the thunderbolt, the thunder, thunder, lightning, and all those kinds of things, this thunderbolt was deemed to be a great cosmic weapon.
Special connection to Nivedita.
Yes. So she compiled on the first Indian flag, which wasn't actually used, she compiled this thunderbolt, this Vajra there, and the reason for that was this very story I just told. This sense of self-sacrificing, that you take all the bones, your own bones, and say, construct something from that, and do it with an equilibrium of mind. So self-sacrifice was there, and the great heroic aspect of this was so much admired by Sister Nivedita. Then of course we have a number of other entities mentioned. So of cows, I am the Kamaduk, that is the entity that fulfills all wishes. We find in the story of Vaishishta, he had this. And again, on an individual level, psychological level, thought itself, since we're mentioning it, is your Kamaduk. Whatever you send out as an intention in such a way that it is not neutralized by doubt or a negative anywhere, will come to fulfillment on the basis that behind everything is a supreme thinker. And then of course the servants and the Vasuki representing the whole of this watery essence that is really the whole universe in a metaphorical way. The commentary goes like this: the Lord has purposely made mention of Vajra, the thunderbolt. The former weapons are eternally part and parcel of his innate being, whereas Vajra is a manufactured one for a set purpose. Indra, the Lord of the Devas, found it impossible to vanquish the invincible Vritrashana, except with the weapon of Vajra. But where on earth or in heaven could the material be found to achieve the great end? He repeats now the story which I just told you. The material for the manufacture of this all-powerful arm is the bones of a sage who is all purity, all austerity, and all perfection, voluntarily given to this cause of universal welfare. Indra found the fulfillment of all of these conditions in this sage, Dadichi. On Indra's presenting his case, the sage sat in samadhi and gave up the body for the conquest of evil. The thunderbolt could be made because of the sacrifice. And manufacture of Vajrayuddha is the ideal ever held out to India in particular, and humanity in general, to combat wickedness. There's also a military honor which is associated with that, I think, as well. The willing self-sacrifice of a large number of holy men and women for public welfare is what is wanted. Now, this commentator, Swami Bhagavad is saying this, but he's saying this, I think, in the spirit of Swami Vivekananda, that now should we keep quiet in the midst of things which upset the upliftment of humanity, or should we speak out, not in a kind of reforming way, but in a sincere way, which has selflessness at its core. And should we not also emulate, therefore, Sister Nivedita and Swami Vivekananda and all others who have this selflessness about them? Or I should mention also Kandalpa, which is the Indian form of Cupid and the personification of the progenitive instinct. We're not being Victorian and prudish. What we're saying is that procreation is one of the genetic directives that is necessary for us. And if it wasn't for this, none of us would be sitting here listening to us. So this also is part of the glory. And then the Nagas, of course, are non-poisonous snakes. Ananta among them is conceived of, or representative as five-headed. I think you'll understand why five. This is a symbol of the Prakriti being made up of the five elements. And because the Lord is resting on Ananta, that is the cosmic ocean, represented as a snake. Snake, cosmic ocean is seen to be the same thing. And because the Lord is resting, he speaks of it as his Vibhuti. Varuna is one of the Vedic deities. In fact, in the early days of the Vedas, Varuna was one of the primary deity, as a matter of fact. He has his jurisdiction on earth now, as in heaven, noted for his intelligence. Pitrus are the departed ancestors, and so the very first to enter the world are the mains, are the Aryama, and so of the Nagas I am Ananta, of the water deities I am Varuna, of the Pitrus I am Aryama, of controllers I am Yam. Life and death are meted out, of course, by Yam, by beings according to their desert, is therefore the best among the controllers. The merit comes to Yam from Ishvara. Now, with all of these descriptions, one thing that occurs to me is these seem to be related to mythological entities and so on. What is the relevance to me? And so there is a deep relevance. For example, let's just take the one entity, Yam, the thing that controls birth, life and death, the thing that receives us, as it were, when we depart from this body. But you see, this controlling element, we are often obsessed with this thing called death. And if we look at, for example, Patanjali Yoga Sutras, we find among the kleshas or obstacles, things that are holding back and conditioning us, one of them is significantly clinging to life. But if we have faith that this birth, life and death is all just part and parcel of the glory of the divine, should we at all be worried? If we understand its cyclical rhythm, should we be worried? Should we view death in a different way? And many of us, the bulk of the community, regard death as some kind of thing that we won't bother about yet, because we'll bother about it maybe when we get older, when we fall sick or whatever it is. And yet, all around us we find it. That's the dichotomy. And the practice of self-control, of course, also is called yama. So in the science of yoga, that's what we mean by yama. Punishment, of course, in the form of pain is inflicted on one who does not practice self-control. So this whole idea of self-control and this link with yama as the controlling factor in death is very relevant to us. He does not deviate an iota in his ideal of justice. That is, you reap what you sow. So it's hugely relevant to us in a practical way. Then we'll go on next week to other aspects of this and do it also in a reflective, meditative way of the Daityas. I'm Prahlada, and I think most of you know the story of Prahlada. And of the reckoners, I am time. This is a hugely important statement. Of peace, I'm the Lord of peace, and Vainetya, of birds, and so it goes on like that. And we need to explain this in greater detail. Particularly, I would say, of the reckoners, I am time. And speaking of time, we finished. So, what is time when you view it? Time can be viewed as a series of units called seconds that arrive now. And our question is, if this river, as it were, of time, is nothing more than the divine flow of waves, then should we not recognize it and in an atmosphere of adoration and worship put something useful and divine into it? And now we've come full circle because your original question. So what should we put into that second? We should put something sattvik. We should put something great, noble, and we should insert with great deal of feeling and imagination some of these examples of these glories that we're understanding and appreciating and looking at. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti, peace, peace, peace be unto all.